The rain was coming down so hard it felt like needles on my skin when my husband shoved me over the threshold and slammed the door in my face. I was 30-6 weeks pregnant. Shaking, holding only the thin cardigan I'd managed to grab, before he ripped the rest of my things from my hands. Through the window, I saw him turn back toward the living room toward his mother, who sat comfortably on our couch, sipping wine like this was entertainment. She smirked at me, then said loudly enough for me to hear through the glass, "If she can't obey simple rules, she doesn't deserve this family." My breath caught, my chest tightened, lightning split the sky behind me, and my husband didn't even look back. He locked the door. The warm glow of our home flickered across the windows as he walked away, leaving me trembling in the storm while his mother laughed. But what they didn't know was that every second of what they did to me that night was being recorded by the neighbors' closed-circuit cameras. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me in the comments which city or state you're watching from, and make sure to like and subscribe so I can bring you even more intense stories. I used to believe I understood cruelty. I thought it came in sharp shapes, raised voices, broken plates, slammed doors. But real cruelty, the kind that eats through the walls of your life, arrives quietly, almost politely, like the way my husband, Michael, began closing doors behind him when he moved from room to room, or how he started whispering on the phone instead of taking calls openly like he used to, or the shift in his tone from warm concern to clipped efficiency anytime I mentioned the baby kicking. At first, I told myself it was stress. We were close to the due date. And yes, his mother Evelyn had moved in temporarily after her hip surgery, though I knew she enjoyed the power it gave her far more than the help she pretended to need. Still, I swallowed the discomfort. I smiled. I tried to keep peace. But peace doesn't exist when someone else is actively dismantling you one quiet cruelty at a time. The first real fracture began on a Tuesday morning. I was washing dishes when I heard whispering in the hallway. Two voices, Michael and his mother. The door was cracked just enough for sound to slip through. I froze, hands in soapy water, heart knocking against my ribs. "She's becoming a liability," Evelyn hissed. "Her emotions are everywhere. She cries at everything. She questions everything. I'm telling you, this is the time to act." "Act?" Michael replied, voice lower, controlled. "She won't fight it. She can barely stand for more than 15 minutes without wheezing." "Well, handle it before the baby comes." My blood ran cold. Handle what? A micro-minus cliffhanger pulsed inside my chest. I wiped my hands, crept closer, breath held tight. But the moment I reached the hall, the conversation stopped. A door clicked shut. Silence expanded like fog. When Michael reappeared minutes later, he smiled at me with calculated softness. "You okay, sweetheart? You look pale." I nodded because my throat had closed. But something in my stomach tightened, not the baby, but instinct. Something was very, very wrong. The first shift came in my environment. Light bulbs unscrewed. Medicine cabinets reorganized. Keys not where I left them. Phone moved from the kitchen counter to the bedroom dresser. When I asked Michael about it, he tilted his head with sympathetic irritation. "You're tired. Pregnant women forget things. It's normal." But it wasn't normal. I'd spent years as an administrative coordinator. I didn't forget things. I lived by routine and order. Then there was the smell. A faint chemical scent lingering in our bedroom each night before I fell asleep. Too faint to identify. Too persistent to ignore. When I mentioned it, Michael brushed past me and opened the window. "You're hypersensitive. Maybe pregnancy hormones are messing with your senses." Maybe they were. But my fear wasn't hormonal, it was logical. And fear has a way of sharpening your senses, not dulling them. 3 days later, I found paperwork I wasn't meant to see. I was looking for a heating pad when I opened the wrong drawer. Inside, beneath folded shirts, was a manila envelope. I shouldn't have touched it, but I did. Inside, a drafted separation agreement, an estimate for a storage unit rental, a printed email from his mother with the subject line, "Finalized before delivery." My pulse hammered so hard I nearly dropped the papers. I reread them, again and again, until the words carved themselves into my brain. He was planning to separate from me before the baby was born. before I could legally claim shared assets, before I could fight back. Every paragraph, every number, every clause was designed to leave me with nothing. The why? We had no major fight, no betrayal, no collapse in love that I could name. Unless the collapse had been 1-sided. Quiet, pre-meditated. I placed the papers exactly as I found them, fingers trembling. My heart was no longer beating. It was warning. That evening brought the second major crack. I was resting on the couch when I overheard Devlin on a phone call. Yes, the move outdate is set no. She doesn't know, of course she'll sign it, she won't have a choice. You said you'd de-handle the nursery furniture, right? Good. Donate it. She won't be using it. My breath froze. Donate it? She won't be using it? What did that mean? The walls felt thinner than ever. Every word I heard felt like glass slicing air. I stood up too fast, dizziness swelling behind my eyes. My vision blurred for a split second. When it cleared, I was gripping the back of the couch just to stay upright. Are you spying on me? Evelyn snapped when she noticed me. I heard you talking about the nursery. Her lips curled upward in a smile that never reached her eyes. A nursery is a reward, dear, not an entitlement. She left the room without another word. Saw cliffhanger. A danger. I sank slowly back onto the couch, one hand instinctively covering my belly. Baby, I whispered. Something is happening. I don't know what, but it'll protect you. I swear. But even then, a dark thought flickered. What if protection wasn't enough? What if survival itself was at risk? 2 days before the storm, the third fracture arrived. Michael didn't come home. He said he had work late. But at midnight, I woke up to a sound, a faint mechanical click near the front door. A cliffhanger tightened every nerve in my spine. I slipped out of bed and crept toward the living room. A shadow moved. Not Michael. Not anyone I recognized. Just a figure crouching near the lock, inserting something metal into the latch. Then, another mechanical click. I gasped before I could stop myself. The figure froze, then ran out the door. When Michael returned an hour later, I confronted him. I saw someone tampering with the lock. He cut me off instantly. Sarah, you imagined it. I didn't imagine a person in our house. You're exhausted, he said, calm in a way that made my stomach twist. Let's not escalate your anxiety. My anxiety? No. This was survival. This was observation. But his tone was chillingly certain enough to make me hesitate. Maybe the light played tricks, I whispered. He stepped toward me and lifted my chin. That's right. You just need rest. But when he turned away, the mask slipped, and I saw satisfaction flicker across his face. He wanted me exhausted, confused, disoriented. It wasn't paranoia if evidence kept appearing in plain sight. The final crack came on the night of the storm. Rain battered the windows. Wind howled down the street. Thunder shook the roof. And inside the house, the real storm brewed. I found Evelyn standing in the nursery, touching things, examining things, judging things. What are you doing in here? I asked, heart thudding. She didn't turn around. This room is getting repurposed. For what? The baby will be here soon. She finally turned, her expression carved from ice. The baby is not your future, she said. Michael is. I stumbled back. What does that even mean? But she didn't answer. Instead, she walked past me, leaving a trail of lavender perfume and cold dread. Minutes later, Michael entered the room. Pack a bag, he said. What? You're leaving? Leaving? In this weather? I'm due in for weeks. You're emotionally unstable, he said. You need space. Time away. Michael. I'm pregnant. He grabbed my arm not violently, but firmly. You're leaving tonight. Lightning flashed. Thunder cracked. And he pushed me toward the door. Michael. Stop. Please. Talk to me. But he didn't. He opened the door, and the wind blasted rain into my face. Out, he said. Then, like a final insult carved into stone, Evelyn added, if she can't obey simple rules, she doesn't deserve this family. The door slammed, and the world went black. But across the street, A small red light blinked on a security camera. Quiet, patient, and watching. I wrapped my arms around my stomach and stared at our house. My home. And then I saw it. A figure moving behind the curtains. Not Michael. Not Evelyn. Someone else. Someone who wasn't supposed to be there. And in that instant, I realized this wasn't about separation at all. It was about removing me. The rain soaked through every layer of my clothing as I stood on the porch, trying to comprehend the reality that had unfolded in a matter of minutes. I felt my heartbeat echo inside my ribs, heavy and uneven, as if my body was trying to decide whether it should panic or simply shut down. The wind pushed against me, sending sharp streams of water across my face, and for a moment I wondered if Michael expected me to collapse right there, expected my body to break so he could claim I had been unstable all along. But even through the shock, something inside me refused to fall apart. Not yet, not like this. I stepped off the porch slowly, holding my belly with both hands to steady myself, and as I walked into the storm, a movement behind the curtains caught my eye. It wasn't Michael's broad silhouette or Evelyn's stiff posture. Whatever was happening inside my house was part of something bigger, more orchestrated, and it only seemed the first stage. A cliffhanger pulsed through me like a warning. I turned toward the street, unsure where to go, when I saw a porch light flick on across the road. The light wasn't bright, just warm enough to cut a faint path through the rain. For a moment I didn't understand why it appeared, but then I noticed someone standing behind the glass of their front door, watching me. Not with judgment, not with disgust, but with concern so genuine that it made my throat tighten. It was Mr. Coleman, our next-door neighbor, a man in his late 60s who rarely spoke but always offered a polite nod when we crossed paths. He opened the door and motioned for me to come inside. I hesitated, partly because I didn't want to burden anyone, and partly because I still couldn't believe what had just happened. But then a gust of wind shoved a sheet of rain straight into my chest, and my baby shifted painfully under my ribs, reminding me that hesitation was a luxury I no longer had. I hurried toward his house, half slipping on the wet pavement, and by the time I reached his porch, my breath was ragged and my hands were trembling so violently I had to grip the railing for support. He stepped aside to let me in, his expression tightening when he saw the state I was in. "My God, Sarah, what did he do?" he whispered. The warmth of his house hit me all at once, flooding my senses with the scent of old wood, damp wool, and the faint aroma of vanilla from a candle burning in the corner. For a moment I didn't answer him. My voice felt buried under layers of shock, shame, and exhaustion. But when I finally spoke, the words tumbled out in uneven fragments. He locked me out. He said I had to leave. I'm not safe there. Mr. Coleman didn't reply immediately. Instead, he studied my face the way a doctor might assess a patient who just staggered in from a battlefield. Then he nodded to himself in a slow, deliberate motion, as if something he had suspected for a long time had just been confirmed. "Sit down," he said gently. "You need to breathe for a moment." I sat on the edge of his couch, still dripping water onto the carpet, and he quickly fetched a blanket, wrapping it around my shoulders with surprising gentleness. For a man who rarely spoke, he moved with quiet confidence, as if he had prepared himself for a day when something like this might happen. "Do you want me to call someone?" he asked. But before I could answer, another cliffhanger rippled through me. A sudden noise echoed from outside a door slamming, followed by hurried footsteps crossing my yard. I stiffened instantly, gripping the blanket so tightly that my knuckles went white. Mr. Coleman moved toward the window, lifted a corner of the curtain, and peered into the storm. His voice dropped. "Someone's behind your house." I felt the room tilt. "Who?" He didn't say right away. When he stepped back from the window, his expression carried a seriousness I had never seen on him before. "I don't think whoever that is should be there," he said, choosing his words with heavy precision. "And I don't think they came alone." A shift in tone. A rise in danger. A new layer of threat. My pulse stumbled. "Michael?" "No," he whispered. "Someone younger. Someone moving too quickly to be part of an argument. They're looking for something." I felt my breath catch. "Mr. Coleman, what's going on?" He hesitated only a second before he spoke again. "There's something you should know," he said. "My outdoor cameras, they record everything facing the street, and the side of your yard, and part of your porch." The room suddenly felt smaller, tighter, as if the truth itself were drawing in around us. "I saw what he did to you," he continued. "Every second of it." A mix of relief and dread washed through me so intensely I had to steady myself on the armrest. "Why minus you have footage?" "Yes." His pause dragged like a slow moving shadow. "And it shows more than you think." My hands trembled beneath the blanket, not from cold this time, but from the weight of the revelation settling over me. "What do you mean more?" He opened his mouth, then stopped. A noise interrupted him. A metallic clatter from outside, followed by the quick patter of someone running across wet pavement. He hurried back to the window and looked out again, his jaw tightening. "They're leaving now," he said. "Whoever they are, they weren't supposed to be there long." A cliffhanger settled deep into my spine. He moved toward the small desk near the stairs and opened a drawer, pulling out a USB drive and a folded sheet of paper. He brought them to me and set them on the coffee table. "This is the footage," he said. He tapped the folded paper. "This is something I found near your driveway earlier today." He unfolded it slowly, revealing a printed document with a signature line at the bottom. My name, my address, a date, and a clause that made my stomach drop. "Emergency removal authorization, subject deemed psychologically unstable and unfit for prenatal environment." My vision blurred for a moment as I read the words, not because of the water dripping from my hair, but because the betrayal they represented was almost too enormous to absorb. "What is this?" "Your husband's name is on the second page," he said softly. I sat there frozen, unable to breathe properly. They were building a case, a narrative, a justification, not for separation, not for divorce, but for removing me from the environment before the baby arrived legally, permanently, devastatingly. "They were going to say I was unstable," I murmured. Mr. Coleman nodded slowly. "That's what the footage proves wrong." My heart pounded against my ribs, each beat it all. Painful thud. "Why would he do this?" I choked out. He hesitated, as if weighing whether to speak the thought he'd been holding back. "When someone is desperate," he said, "financially cornered, they make decisions they wouldn't make otherwise." A cold realization crept into me. Michael's failed business deal, his sudden secrecy, his mother's involvement, the stranger in my house. This wasn't about me being unstable. This was about what they stood to gain. What did he lose? "Everything," Mr. Coleman said. "His investment company collapsed last month. He owes a lot of money, and based on everything I've observed," he took a slow breath, "your baby, unfortunately, is part of his leverage." A deep, consuming silence filled the room. Then another shift. Another turn in the emotional spiral. "I need to see the footage," I said, my voice gaining strength for the first time since the storm began. "I need to know exactly what they planned." "You will," he promised. "You need to rest." "I can't rest," I said. "Not until I know everything." He studied me carefully, then nodded with reassurance. "All right. But before we watch it, you should hear something important." I swallowed hard. He lowered himself into the chair across from me, his expression both gentle and grim. "You think the betrayal started tonight," he said. "But according to the footage, it began weeks ago." My breath stilled. "Weeks?" I whispered. "What were they planning?" He held my gaze with a seriousness that wrapped around my ribs like a tightening band. "You won't believe what happens next," he said. And in that moment, I knew Part R had only scraped the surface of something far darker than being locked out of my home. The blanket around my shoulders had finally stopped shaking when Mr. Coleman rose from his chair, walked toward a small cabinet near the bookshelf, and retrieved a thin black binder that looked far too official to belong to an ordinary neighbor. His movements were slow and careful, almost ceremonial, as if he had rehearsed this moment in his mind for days and was now watching it unfold exactly as he feared it would. When he placed the binder on the coffee table in front of me, he hesitated for a moment, his hand lingering on the cover while he studied my face, searching for signs that I was strong enough to see what lay inside. "I didn't want to overwhelm you tonight," he said quietly, But after what happened out there, you deserve to know the full truth. His voice carried weight, the kind of deliberate heaviness people use only when they're about to deliver news that will rearrange someone's entire reality. My heart began beating faster again, not with the same frantic panic as before, but with a steadier, more controlled rhythm. The rhythm of someone who knows the truth is finally within reach and is terrified of what that truth might be. "What's in there?" I asked, my voice thin but determined. "Evidence," he replied. "More than I expected to find, honestly, and more than anyone should ever have to collect." A micro-minus cliffhanger settled into the air between us, stretching the moment just enough to throb in my chest. He opened the binder slowly, revealing the first page, a printed transcript of a conversation. I leaned forward, my eyes scanning the text, and my entire body went cold when I saw the date. 3 weeks ago. Long before the storm. Long before the shouting. Long before the night he forced me out the door. The transcript showed timestamps, brief lines of dialogue, and short descriptions of who was speaking. At first glance it looked like something from a legal deposition, but at second glance at the moment my eyes caught the words, "recorded via external audio capture." I realized what I was looking at. "This is from your cameras?" "Yes," he said. "The microphones are sensitive. They pick up more than just the driveway." I looked down again, and the first dialogue exchange tightened every muscle in my stomach. Evelyn's chest becoming unpredictable. "If we don't do something soon, she'll ruin everything." A wave of nausea washed over me so abruptly that I had to press a hand against my belly to steady myself. My baby shifted beneath my ribs as if sensing my distress, and for a moment, all I could think was how close we had both come to danger without even realizing it. "What were they talking about?" I whispered. Coleman said, his voice gentle but urging. The next lines hit harder. "Evelyn, we need the papers ready. Once Shess removed, you can file for full guardianship." "Michael Leaf. And the assets?" "Evelyn, everything shifts to you once the claim is approved. Shall have no legal standing." I felt the room tilt sideways. Guardianship. Assets. Removal. They weren't trying to separate from me. They weren't trying to create distance. They were trying to erase me entirely legally. Socially, financially. My breath grew shallow as another line jumped out from the page. "Michael, she still trusts me." "Evelyn, use it while you can. Play the supportive husband until the evaluation date." I looked up at Mr. Coleman, horror widening my eyes. "Evaluation date? What evaluation date?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he flipped to the next page, a copy of a formal letter addressed to Michael, dated 2 weeks ago, from a family services contractor. The subject line: "Psychological Stability Assessment Final Appointment Confirmation." I felt the air leave my lungs in one slow, frushing exhale. "They scheduled an evaluation about me?" I whispered. "Yes," he said. "And according to the letter, if you failed the assessment, the next steps would have been immediate removal and emergency guardianship transfer." My chest tightened painfully. They were going to take my baby. Mr. Coleman nodded once, a slow, sorrowful motion that confirmed everything my heart had been trying to deny. "That was the plan," he said. Another micro-minus cliffhanger pulsed through me, sharp and electric. I leaned back on the couch, the blankets lighting down my shoulder as I stared at the binder, feeling the threads of my old life unraveling with every new revelation. The betrayal no longer felt abstract. It had become a structured, documented operation, mapped out weeks in advance with cold precision. "How long have you known?" I asked. His jaw tightened, not with guilt, but with the weight of a man who had been forced to watch darkness unfold from the outside. "I first noticed unusual activity about a month ago," he said. "Strangers visiting your house. Delivery trucks dropping off in marked boxes. Conversations happening at odd hours. I didn't want to assume the worst, but when I saw how they started treating you, I knew something wasn't right." My heartbeat slowed into a deep, heavy rhythm. "And you recorded everything?" "I record everything by default," he said. The revelation caught me off guard. "Risk assessment?" He gave a faint, humorless smile. "I didn't always live a quiet life on a peaceful street. It was a detail I hadn't expected, an unexpected ally revealing a hidden aspect of himself at the perfect moment. Just when I needed to understand his competence and reliability. But before I could ask anything else, he returned his attention to the binder. "There's something else you need to see." He flipped to a page filled with printed screenshots, each one labeled with timestamps corresponding to different nights. The grainy images showed figures entering and exiting my backyard at late hours, always carrying something: his wife. Tools, boxes, bags, items I couldn't identify from the low light. "Who are these people?" I asked. "That's what I'm still trying to determine," he said. "But one thing is clear: this wasn't a spontaneous decision. They've been preparing for weeks." He turned another page, and everything inside me froze. At the top was a photograph of a document partially pulled from my mailbox. The edges were slightly bent from being grabbed too quickly, but the text was visible enough. "Newborn custody transfer application pending verification." My stomach dropped. My throat closed. A cold, metallic numbness spread through my limbs. They were preparing custody paperwork before the baby was even born, I murmured. "Yes," Mr. Coleman confirmed quietly. "Which means they intended for you to be out of the picture long before your due date." Another micro-minus cliffhanger tightened like a fist around my ribs. I felt myself trembling again, not from cold but from the realization that my entire life, my home, my marriage, my safety, my child had been one bad decision away from slipping into the hands of people who saw me as an obstacle rather than a human being. I pressed both hands against my belly to steady myself. "I don't understand," I whispered. "Why would he do this? Why would he risk everything? Why would he try to take my baby instead of fixing his life?" Mr. Coleman took a slow breath, choosing his words with precision. "Because desperation makes people cruel," he said. "And when someone is drowning financially, emotionally, or socially, they will grab onto anything, even their own child, if they believe it might keep them afloat." His next sentence carried a gravity that felt like a warning. "And Michael is drowning more than you know." A shift in danger. A new layer of betrayal. "What do you mean?" Gripping the blanket again, he reached into the binder and removed another sheet. This one filled with numbers, account balances, and overdue notices. "Archie has been hiding the extent of his debt," he said. "His business collapse was just a setback. It was catastrophic. He owes money to people who don't wait politely for repayment." A chill ran through me. So he thought. Taking the baby would what? Fix his finances? "Not directly," Mr. Coleman said. "But there's a trust fund on your side of the family, isn't there? Set to activate when your child is born?" I froze. "How do you know about that?" "You mentioned it casually months ago," he said. "And if I remember, the fund converts into parental management rights upon birth." I felt my breath catch. "That means whoever has custody controls the fund." He nodded. "And if you were declared unstable before the baby arrived, custody would automatically shift to the father." The revelation hit me like a door slamming shut in the dark. "He wanted control," I whispered. "Not of me. And Evelyn," he added, "would ensure it stayed in the family." The room felt colder now, despite the warm air circulating from the vent. Everything made sense in a horrifying, grotesque way. But the next page he turned shattered whatever pieces of my old worldview remained. It was a screenshot of an email from Michael to someone whose name was blacked out. "Everything is on schedule. She believes she's safe. After Friday, she won't be a problem." "Friday? That's tomorrow," I said. "Yes," he whispered. A long, tense silence followed. Then another knock of danger, a sudden, sharp shift. My phone buzzed. I flinched so hard I nearly dropped the blanket. It buzzed again. Then again. The screen lit up with a name I never wanted to see again. "Michael R. missed calls. Michael some messages." He message. A sickening dread swirled inside me. What does he want? Coleman's eyes darkened. "Open it." I did. Michael's messages appeared. "Where are you? You need to come home now. We can talk. Don't make this worse." But it was his mother's message that sent a shudder down my spine. "Come back tonight. We can still fix the paperwork." Fix the paperwork. It was confirmation. They weren't panicked. They weren't sorry. They weren't confused. They were continuing the plan. Even after throwing me into a storm. Even after I disappeared into the night. Even now. A slow, cold rage unfurled inside me. Not chaotic rage. Not panicked rage. A calculated, sharpened rage that felt like the beginning of something inevitable. I stood up slowly, my hands steady on the edge of the couch. "Mr. Coleman," I said quietly, "I need to know everything. Every detail. Every recording. Every document. I won't be afraid anymore." He nodded once, resolute. "There's still more," he said. And then he spoke the words that shifted the entire story again. The words that pushed the narrative into a darker, deeper spiral. "Sarah, the third person you saw in the window tonight was a stranger." My mouth went dry. "Who was it?" He hesitated. Then he said it. "It was your doctor." The room fell silent. Not empty, but full of impact. The kind that shakes the floor beneath your feet. And in that silence, I understood. This betrayal was just personal. It was coordinated. It was professional. It was nearly perfect. Nearly. Because now I knew. And the knowledge itself was the first weapon in my revenge. For several moments after Mr. Coleman spoke, the room felt unnaturally still, as though the air itself had turned dense enough to swallow sound. The idea of my doctor, the physician I had trusted for months, the person who had monitored my child's heartbeat, measured my growth, reassured me during every doubt standing inside my home on the very night I was thrown into the storm, was so profoundly disorienting that my brain struggled to assemble the pieces into anything coherent. Betrayal from a spouse was catastrophic. Betrayal from a mother in law was corrosive. But betrayal from someone with medical authority, someone who could alter records, influence assessments, and frame narratives around mental stability was a different kind of violence entirely. I pressed my hands against my stomach, feeling my child shift beneath my palms, and something in me clicked into place. It wasn't fear anymore, not even heartbreak. It was resolve, as slow minus burning, riser minus sharp resolve that crept through my veins like a promise I had just made to myself. What was he doing there? I asked finally, my voice low but steadier than before. Mr. Coleman closed the binder, gently unfolded his hands over it, as if preparing to deliver a verdict. "I reviewed the footage twice," he said. "Your doctor entered through the back door around 7:30, long before the argument happened. He brought a briefcase with him. And when he left, he didn't take it out the same way he brought it in." A cold tremor ran down my spine. "What was inside it?" "I don't know," he said. "But when he left, he slipped something into Michael's hand, something small, flat, in an envelope." Their body language made it clear this was a professional house call. My pulse quickened. "Is it possible he planted something in the house?" Mr. Coleman nodded slowly. "That's exactly what I think." A micro-minus cliffhanger tightened the air in the room. I tried to piece the situation together. The custody paperwork, the psychological evaluation letter, the unmarked visitors, the tampered locks, the chemical smell in the bedroom. Every concern I'd brushed aside suddenly bloomed into dreadful clarity. "They weren't trying to remove me because they believed I was unstable," I said. "They were building evidence to prove it." "Exactly," he said. "And a medical professional siding with them would give their case credibility." My throat tightened. "So what do I do now?" He studied me for a long moment, his eyes narrowing slightly as the beginnings of a plan formed behind them. "You fight back," he said. "Not emotionally, not impulsively, strategically. A shift. A new emotional rhythm. The first rise of hope. But I don't even know where to begin," I whispered. "You begin," he said, "by gathering your own evidence. The plan begins." He stood, walked across the room, and pulled open the narrow coat closet by the stairs. I expected umbrellas, maybe a jacket or two, but instead I saw what looked like a compact surveillance setup. Powered hard drives, cables neatly coiled, spare camera lenses, and a stack of SD cards organized in labeled plastic cases. I blinked, startled. "You have all this?" "I told you," he said without looking back. "My previous career required me to be meticulous and cautious." He set a collection of equipment on the coffee table. "We're going to make copies of everything," he said. "Footage, documents, timestamps, stills, all of it. If they're building a case against you, well, build one twice as strong against them. I nodded slowly, the blanket slipping from my shoulders as I leaned forward, drawn now by a sense of purpose that felt foreign after weeks of confusion and dread. But that's not enough, he continued. You need more than evidence. You need leverage. A micro-minus cliffhanger hummed between us. What kind of leverage? The kind that turns predators on their heels, he said. The kind that forces them to reveal themselves. I swallowed hard. How? We're going to make them think you're walking back into their trap, he said. The idea terrified me, and yet, for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something powerful blooming in my chest. The beginning of control. How do we start? With this, he said, handing me my phone. Text him, he instructed. I stared at the screen, my heart thudding painfully as I typed slowly, deliberately. I'm coming home. We should talk. The moment I pressed send, a deeper silence fell over us, the kind of silence that comes before a pivotal shift in power. The first power shift. It didn't take long for Michael to reply. Good, come now. We'll sort this out. I felt my stomach knot. Those words weren't concern. They were expectation, entitlement. Even. He thinks you're scared, Mr. Coleman murmured. Good. Fear blinds people. Especially people who think they're smarter than everyone around them. A faint surge of strength flickered in me. So what now? I obviously can't go back there. No, he said. He took my phone again and typed something quickly before handing it back. On the screen, location services disabled. All permissions revoked. You need to appear compliant, he said, but not traceable. And then? I asked. And then you let them talk, he said. People who believe they've won tend to confess without realizing it. A micro-minus cliffhanger thrummed under my skin. He moved toward his equipment and began setting up a small recorder, connecting cables, checking levels, preparing for the next step. Well, call him soon, he said. But first, you need to breathe. I did, though my body vibrated with adrenaline and fear. Look at me. I lifted my eyes to his. You're not powerless, he said softly. You're not alone, and you're not walking into their hands blindly. You're walking in with knowledge. Something inside me steadied. Something that had cracked earlier began to harden into resolve. Okay, I whispered. The doctor's roll. He opened another folder from the binder. This one marked with the date of my last checkup. I cross-checked your medical records, he said. There are inconsistencies. My pulse quickened. What kind? For one thing, he continued. Your doctor noted symptoms you never reported: delusions, mood swings, paranoia. A surge of heat flared inside my chest, betrayal mixing with outrage. I never said those things, I said. I know, he replied. But the pattern is clear. He was building a written profile to match the psychological assessment they planned for you. My grip tightened around the blanket. He wrote that I was paranoid. Yes, and that you had unstable emotional responses. That you were experiencing hallucination minus like sensory distortions. Mr. Coleman nodded grimly. Likely intentional. Designed to provoke reactions they could point to later. A deep, slow burning fury unfurled inside me, not frantic, but focused. And he entered my house tonight. I murmured. Why? To plant more evidence? Possibly, he said. Or to retrieve something they no longer needed. Another cliffhanger thrummed in the air. Either way, he continued, we will use the footage and the tampered records to dismantle his credibility. But how? By exposing his involvement to the medical board, to law enforcement, and if necessary to the public. A shift. A strategy. A new path forward. The plan was forming like storm clouds, consolidating into a single, powerful mass. But we weren't finished yet. The mother's roll. Mr. Coleman retrieved one more document. A typed letter, folded in thirds. This, he said, is the part you haven't seen. The part they never wanted you to see. He unfolded it, revealing Evel Ann's handwriting at the bottom. It was addressed not to Michael, but to my doctor. The contents made my skin crawl. Once the evaluation is complete, proceed as discussed. She will not have the presence of mind to resist. The father will assume responsibility, and the transfer will be seamless. Compensation will be provided. I stared at the letter as if it might burst into flames from the sheer intensity of my disgust. She paid him, I whispered. She incentivized him, Mr. Coleman corrected. Which is even worse. I pressed a shaky hand to my mouth. How long has she hated me this much? Hatred isn't the right word, he said. Some people crave control more than affection. And she despises anything she can't control. Another beat of silence passed. Then a shift. Lighter, sharper, more intentional. What do we do about her? I asked. We let her speak, he said. Speak? Yes. People like her never can. A micro-minus cliffhanger quivered in my chest. The phone call. He set the recorder on the table, connected the audio feed to his laptop, and motioned for me to sit close. When you call him, he said, you need to sound vulnerable. Not broken, not hysterical, just uncertain enough that he believes you're ready to surrender. The thought made bile rise in my throat. I don't want to pretend to be scared. You're not pretending, he said gently. You're using what he expects to turn the tables. I exhaled slowly, letting the fear settle just below the surface where it could be shaped into something useful. There. He handed me my phone. Call him. My fingers shook as I dialed Michael's number, not from weakness, but from the knowledge that this conversation could change everything. The line rang twice before he answered. Sarah? His voice was smooth, composed, falsely concerned. I swallowed hard. I think we need to talk. Where are you? He demanded. You shouldn't be out in this weather. His tone lost worry. It was irritation masked as concern. I'm close, I said. I just need to understand what's happening. A pause. A wrestle. A muffled female voice in the background. Evelyn. There's nothing to understand, he said. You had an episode. You need help. If you come back now, we can fix this before tomorrow. The evaluation. The deadline. I didn't have an episode, I whispered. You pushed me out. That was for your own good, he snapped. You were becoming unpredictable. I flinched not from his words, but from the way he delivered them so effortlessly, like he was reading lines from a script he had rehearsed. I just want things to go back to normal, I said, letting my voice tremble the slightest bit. A satisfied exhale came through the line. He believed it. Good. Come home, he said. We can sign what needs to be signed, and then we'll move forward as a family. What needs to be signed? I asked softly. He hesitated. A micro-minus cliffhanger. It doesn't matter, he said. Just come home. Then Evelyn's voice slipped through the speaker, sharp as glass. Tell her the paperwork is ready. She just needs to sign and step aside. Step aside. My jaw clenched, fury simmering under the surface. But my voice stayed fragile. Paperwork for what? For custody, she said bluntly. You're not fit to raise a child in your condition. A murmur rippled through me, not fear. Not anymore. Rage carefully restrained. I just want my baby to be safe, I said quietly. Then come home, Michael said. We'll take care of everything. The trap was set, and they had walked directly into it. I ended the call slowly. My entire body buzzed with adrenaline. Mr. Coleman looked at me with quiet pride. You were perfect, he said, and they incriminated themselves on almost every line. I exhaled a long, shaking breath. So what do we do now? I asked. He closed the binder. Now, he said, we prepare for tomorrow. Another shift. Another rise in tension. But tomorrow is the evaluation. I whispered. He nodded. And we'll be there. With recordings. With documents. A micro-minus cliffhanger thrummed inside me. And after that, his voice dropped, steady and unwavering. After that we bring them down. The way he said it made something inside me ignite a spark that grew into a quiet, powerful flame. Not fear, not desperation. Revenge. As I stood from the couch, gathering the binder of evidence into my arms, the storm outside eased into a steady rain. And as lightning flickered faintly in the distance, I felt something shift deep inside my chest, a sense that the weakest version of me had been washed away with the storm, leaving someone sharper, stronger, far more dangerous than they ever believed I could be. But then Mr. Coleman placed a hand on my arm and spoke one last sentence, one that sent a fresh shiver through me. "Sarah, there's something you still don't know." I turned slowly. "What is it?" He hesitated. "The evaluation tomorrow was the only appointment they scheduled." The room grew impossibly still. "What other appointment?" I whispered. His answer hit me like a second betrayal. "Your doctor filed a request for a mandatory pre-term induction without your consent." My breath caught. "They were planning to take the baby early," he said. The cliffhanger settled with devastating weight. And in that chilling moment, I realized tomorrow wouldn't just determine my future. It would determine whether my baby survived what they had planned. I took a long, steady breath as the weight of Mr. Coleman's words sank into my chest, spreading outward in a cold, controlled wave that sharpened every one of my senses. A mandatory pre-term induction, filed without my knowledge, without my consent. A procedure that could jeopardize both my health and my baby's life, and they had scheduled it behind my back, confident I would be too confused, too frightened, too disoriented to question it. The realization didn't weaken me. It strengthened something deep inside me, something I didn't even know existed until that very moment. A ferocious, unwavering determination that no one, not Michael, not Evelyn, not my doctor, would ever touch my child again. The storm outside had finally calmed, leaving the world washed in a muted gray light that filtered through the windows like the quiet before a battle. I wrapped the blanket tighter around my shoulders and lowered myself onto the couch again. My pulse still uneven, but my mind focused in a way it hadn't been in weeks. The fear was still there, yes. Fear for my baby, fear for what tomorrow might bring, but beneath it was a quiet current of clarity. A sense that all the secrets, all the documents, all the whispered conversations and hidden plans had led to this moment. And now that I knew the truth, I could finally choose my next step, not from confusion, but from knowledge. "What time is the induction scheduled?" I asked softly. He said, "At the hospital where your doctor practices." A cold shudder rippled through me. That hospital had been a place of comfort until now, the place where I heard my baby's heartbeat for the first time, where I watched the blurry outlines of tiny hands and feet move across the ultrasound screen, unaware that the very person guiding me through those moments was planning to weaponize my wast. "If they think I'm coming," I said slowly, "they'll be waiting." "They will," he agreed. "Which is why you won't go." "Not there anyway." My heart thudded louder. "To the evaluator," he said, but not empty-handed. He closed the binder gently, the sound small but final. "Tomorrow morning, we file everything. The recordings, the documents, the transcripts. Then we walk into the evaluation room with proof they never expected you to have." The plan formed in the air between us, a careful choreography of timing, evidence, and deception, the same tactics they had used against me, but now turned back on them with precision. "And the induction?" I asked. "Once your evaluator sees this evidence," he said, tapping the binder, "the doctor's request will be flagged and immediately investigated. You will not be anywhere near that hospital when they realize their scheme is collapsing." I exhaled slowly. I can't believe they wanted to force the baby out early. "Because the earlier the birth," he said, "the easier it is to control custody and restrict parental involvement. And if they induced early and then claimed you weren't fit, you wouldn't even be allowed in the room." I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling my baby shift beneath my ribs as if aware of the storm gathering around us. Soft ache pulsed across my belly, not painful but insistent, reminding me that time was no longer an abstract concept. "What if they realize I'm not coming back tonight?" I whispered. "They won't," he said. "They think you're frightened, and frightened people freeze. They wait." "But I'm not frightened anymore," I murmured. He nodded. "No, you're ready." We spent the next hour copying every file, duplicating every document, and organizing each piece of evidence into a digital archive that could be shared instantly if anything went wrong. He walked me through each step methodically, teaching me how to back up the recordings, how to timestamp them, how to encrypt them so that no one could alter or delete the contents. Every small action steadied me a little more, strengthened me a little more, gave me a feeling of control I had lost long before being thrown into the storm. By the time we finished, the rain had stopped entirely, replaced by the quiet hum of streetleted and the occasional sound of tires rolling through wet pavement. The house felt different now, not a place of refuge, but a place of preparation. A war room where we finalized the truth they thought I would never uncover. "You need sleep," he said finally. "Tomorrow will be a long day." I wanted to argue. Sleep felt impossible, like a luxury I no longer had access to. But he was right. If I showed up exhausted, trembling, unfocused, it would feed the narrative they were trying to build about me. I couldn't give them that advantage. Not now. He made up the guest room for me, adjusting the pillows and dimming the lamp to a soft glow. The moment I lay down, my body sank into the mattress with a heaviness that reminded me how long I had been carrying this fear without understanding its cause. The baby moved again, a gentle roll beneath my ribs, and I placed my hand over the spot, whispering, "We're okay. I promise we're okay." But sleep didn't come easily. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw flashes of the night, the door slamming in my face, Evelyn's cold words echoing through the rain, the stranger inside my home, the doctor handing something to Michael, the forged documents waiting quietly in drawers I wasn't meant to open. Every scene replayed with painful clarity until it formed a single, unmistakable truth. They hadn't lost control of the situation. They had never expected me to fight. But tomorrow, everything would change. When sleep finally overtook me, it was shallow and restless, broken by fragments of dreams I couldn't quite remember. I woke before sunrise to the pale pink glow filtering through the curtains. The air was cool, the house was silent, and for the first time since the nightmare began, I felt ready. Mr. Coleman was already awake, a mug of coffee in his hand, the binder of evidence open on the table. He looked up when I entered and gave a small nod of acknowledgement, a silent affirmation that today was the day everything shifted. "Are you ready?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "More than ready. We leave in 30 minutes. I ate a small piece of toast, more out of obligation than hunger, and drank enough water to steady the slight tightness in my chest. My nerves fluttered beneath my skin in an electric hum, not chaotic but focused, like the energy that fills the air before lightning strikes. When we stepped outside, the world smelled freshly washed, the scent of wet earth and clean pavement mixing with the faint chill of early morning air. I paused at the end of the walkway, glancing toward my house across the street. The windows were dark, the curtains unmoving. The place looked peaceful, almost serene, as if the horrors inside had been nothing more than shadows cast by a passing storm. But I knew better, and soon, everyone else would too. The drive to the evaluator's office was quiet at first. I stared out the window, watching houses and street signs blur together while my thoughts raced faster than the car. Each possibility, each potential reaction from Michael and his mother played through my mind like an unwelcome slideshow. Would they deny everything? Would they lash out? Would they try to twist the narrative again? I didn't know. But I did know that for the first time, the truth was on my side. And the truth was no longer silent. When we arrived, the parking lot was nearly empty. Soft morning light reflected off the windows, giving the building an almost ethereal glow. I took a deep breath and placed a hand over my stomach, grounding myself in the steady rhythm of my baby's movements. Inside, the reception area was quiet. A small fountain trickled water into a stone basin, filling the space with a gentle hum. The receptionist greeted us with a polite smile, unaware of the storm we were bringing with us. When she asked my name and appointment time, her voice was calm and unassuming. She directed us to the waiting area, where we sat side by side, the binder positioned neatly on Mr. Coleman's lap. A door opened, and the evaluator stepped into the hallway. "Sarah?" I rose slowly, keeping my posture steady, my breath even. Coleman walked beside me, not as a guardian or protector, but as a witness, someone who would ensure the truth was heard in full, no matter how hard they tried to bury it. We entered the evaluation room, a simple space with 2 chairs, a desk, and a large window overlooking a row of trees. The evaluator motioned for me to sit. "This assessment will help us understand your current state and any concerns you might have," he said kindly. "I have concerns," I replied, my voice steady. but not about myself. He looked slightly confused but nodded. We'll get to that. I need to ask you a few. That won't be necessary, Mr. Coleman interrupted gently, placing the binder on the desk. The evaluator blinked. Evidence, I said softly, of fraud, coercion, medical misconduct, and a planned custody scheme disguised as a mental health evaluation. The silence that followed was absolute. The evaluator hesitated, then opened the binder. His eyes scanned the first page, then widened. He flipped to the next. Each page deepened the crease between his brows until his professional composure gave way to genuine disbelief. How long has this been happening? He asked quietly. Months? I said. I didn't understand it at first, but now I do. He exhaled slowly. This is serious. Very serious. You'll need to report this immediately. That too, I said. They plan to take my baby before the hearing. His expression hardened. Not anymore, they won't. This ends today. A long, trembling breath escaped my lungs. Relief, fear, gratitude, all tangled together. But the moment was short-lived, because the door suddenly swung open and Michael stood there. His hair was damp, his eyes wide, his chest rising and falling with harsh, rapid breaths as if he had run across the parking lot. Sarah, he said, trying to sound calm but failing. We need to talk. The evaluator stood. Sir, you can't be in here. But Michael ignored him, his gaze fixed entirely on me. What are you doing? Why are you here with him? You're supposed to be at the hospital. They're waiting. I lifted my chin slowly. Not going anywhere with you. A flicker of anger crossed his face. You don't understand. If you just sign the paperwork. No, I said. I understand perfectly. His eyes darted to the binder, then to Mr. Coleman, then back to me. He whispered, I exposed you. A crackle of raw emotion split his expression. Shock, fear, anger, all swirling together without direction. You think this will stop anything? He snapped. You think anyone will believe? I believe her. And this evidence is overwhelming. I'm calling the authorities. Michael lunged forward as if trying to grab the binder. But Mr. Coleman stepped between us, calm and immovable. Don't, he warned. For a moment, Michael looked at him as if seeing him for the first time, not a quiet neighbor, but a threat, a barrier, a wall he couldn't climb. Then Evelyn appeared in the hallway behind him. Her face red, her voice trembling with outrage. This is ridiculous. She's unstable. She doesn't know what she's doing. You can't trust anything she says. The evaluator held up a hand. Mum, the evidence is clear. No, she shrieked, stepping forward. We had everything arranged. And then she stopped abruptly, realizing what she had just admitted. The room went silent again. You had what arranged? The evaluator asked. Her face blanched. Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. I meant the induction, the paperwork. He said firmly. Those procedures were illegal. His shoulders sagging as though the reality of the situation had just crushed the last remaining illusion of control. Sarah, he whispered. Don't do this. I stood slowly, feeling the weight of everything, the betrayal, the fear, the danger lift from my shoulders like a final exhale. You did this, I said. And with those words, something inside me settled. A final, quiet shift. A closing of a chapter I never wanted to live. Authorities arrived within minutes. Statements were taken. Records were collected. Evelyn shouted until her voice cracked. My doctor was escorted out of the hospital in handcuffs 2 hours later. The induction was canceled. The evaluation was marked as compromised and flagged for formal investigation. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, I stood outside the building with Mr. Coleman beside me, the evening air cool against my skin. Is it over? Not yet, he said. But the worst of it is. I nodded, letting relief settle into my bones. Weeks passed. Legal actions unfolded. Custody rights were secured. Charges were filed. And slowly, painfully, beautifully, my life began to rebuild. I gave birth to a healthy baby girl on a quiet morning in early spring. I held her close, breathing in the scent of her soft skin, feeling the weight of her tiny body against my chest. And I truly knew that everything I had endured had led me here. Safe. Stronger. So, months later, I stood on my porch, watching the sunset spill gold across the street. My daughter slept inside, her small breaths like music against the quiet. And when I looked across the road, I saw Mr. Coleman watering his garden, giving me a small, knowing nod. The storm had passed. The darkness had retreated. And I had rebuilt myself from the pieces they tried to break. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear the echo of rain against the windows, and I remember the moment that changed everything to his life. The moment Utter slammed, the moment I was cast into a storm meant to end me. What they didn't know was that storms don't only destroy. Sometimes they reveal the truth. And sometimes they teach you exactly how powerful you really are.